My mother spent $7,000 on a designer ivory gown. The only problem? It wasn't for me, it was for my sister to wear to my wedding. My mom even posted it on Facebook with the caption, "My beautiful girl is going to steal the show." She thought she could humiliate me on the biggest day of my life, but she didn't realize I had a plan of my own. Before I tell you how security was waiting for her at the gate, you need to understand how we got here. My name is Wendy, and for as long as I can remember, I have been living in someone else's shadow. That someone is my older sister, Paige. Paige has always been the center of my mother's world. Everything about her was celebrated. Her looks, her choices, her personality. My mom didn't just love her. She admired her. She treated her like someone special, like someone important. And me? I was just there. Not ignored completely, but never truly seen. Growing up, I used to think maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I needed to try harder. So I did. I tried to be perfect. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I helped around the house. I followed every rule. But no matter what I did, it never felt like enough. Because Paige didn't have to try. She was already enough. I remember one moment very clearly. I was 10 years old, standing in the kitchen holding a drawing I had worked on for days. It wasn't amazing, but it meant something to me. I had put my heart into it. "Mom, look what I made," I said, smiling. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice," she replied, already turning back to her phone. At that exact moment, Paige walked in and said she was thinking about joining a school event. My mom's reaction changed instantly. "That's incredible," she said, her voice full of excitement. "You're going to do amazing. I'm so proud of you." I stood there, still holding my drawing, slowly lowering it. That was the moment I understood something that stayed with me for years. It didn't matter what I did. I would never be her priority. As we grew older, the difference became impossible to ignore. Paige got everything first, and she got the best version of everything. Her first phone was brand new. Mine was her old one, already scratched and slow. Her birthday parties were big, loud, and full of people. Mine were small, quiet, and sometimes forgotten. When she wanted something, my mom made it happen. When I wanted something, I got questions like, "Do you really need that? Or can't you just wait?" Over time, I stopped asking. It was easier not to expect anything, because expectations only led to disappointment. By the time I reached college, I had already created distance between me and my mother. Not physically, but emotionally. I stopped sharing details about my life. I stopped telling her my plans. I stopped looking for her approval. That's when Luke came into my life. Luke was different from anyone I had ever met. He was calm, kind, and most importantly, he listened. The first time we had a real conversation, I remember feeling confused. He asked me questions, and then he actually waited for my answers. Not just to respond, but to understand. No one had ever done that before. First, I didn't open up much. I wasn't used to it. I was used to being overlooked, not heard. But Luke was patient. Slowly, I started telling him about my life. About my childhood. About Paige. About my mother. I expected him to dismiss it like others had. But he didn't. He looked at me and said something I will never forget. "That's not normal, Wendy. You deserved better." Those words stayed in my mind for a long time. Because for the first time, someone was telling me that what I felt was real. That I wasn't imagining things. That I wasn't too sensitive. And slowly, something inside me started to change. I started to believe that maybe I did deserve more. When Luke proposed, it was simple and quiet. No big crowd. No dramatic setup. Just the two of us. We were sitting near the water watching the sunset. The sky was soft and golden, and everything felt calm. He took my hand and said, "I want to build a life with you. A life where you feel seen every day." I didn't hesitate. I said yes. Because in that moment, I felt something I had never truly felt before. Chosen. Not second. Not less. Not invisible. Chosen. But the moment I told my mother, that feeling started to fade. She didn't react the way I hoped. She didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She didn't say congratulations. Instead, she looked at my ring and said, "I hope he knows what he's getting into." I laughed it off at the time, pretending it didn't hurt, but it did. And it got worse. Over the next few days, I started hearing things from other people. My aunt told me, "Your mom is worried about you." Worried? About what? Then another relative said, "She thinks you're rushing into this." Rushing? Luke and I had been together for years. Then I heard the worst one. She said your marriage might not last. That one stayed with me, because it wasn't just doubt. It felt like she was already expecting me to fail. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about how different things were when Paige got engaged. It had been a full celebration. My mom planned everything. Shopping trips, photo shoots, parties. She told everyone, "My daughter deserves the best." But with me, there was no excitement, no pride, no support, just quiet criticism. When I started planning my wedding, I told myself I wouldn't let it affect me. This day was about me and Luke. No one else. But my mother had other plans. First, it was small comments. "You don't need anything expensive," she said. "Keep it simple. It's better not to waste money." Sounded like advice, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like she was already trying to make my wedding smaller, less important. Then came the decisions. Every choice I made became a problem. If I picked something elegant, she called it unnecessary. If I picked something simple, she called it cheap. No matter what I did, it was wrong. And then something changed. I started hearing things from other people again. But this time it wasn't about my wedding choices. It was about me. My aunt asked me one day, "Why are you pushing your mother away?" I was confused. "I'm not," I said. But she looked at me like she didn't believe me. "She says you don't want her involved," she added. That's when I realized what was happening. My mother wasn't just criticizing me anymore. She was telling a story. And in her version, she was the victim. And I was the ungrateful daughter. That moment changed everything. Because I had spent my whole life staying quiet, trying to keep the peace. But now my silence was being used against me. And if I didn't do something, she would control the entire story. Not just in our family, but on my wedding day too. And I couldn't let that happen. Not this time. Not on the one day that was supposed to be mine. So for the first time in my life, I decided I was going to stand up for myself. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. If my mother was planning something, I was going to be ready. The moment I realized my mother was turning everyone against me, something inside me changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet but strong. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking, "Why is she doing this?" and started asking, "What am I going to do about it?" That night I called Megan. Megan wasn't just my maid of honor. She was the one person who had seen everything clearly from the beginning. She had watched me shrink myself around my family. She had watched me stay silent when I should have spoken. And she had never liked it. When she picked up the phone, she didn't even say hello. She said, "What happened?" I didn't realize how much I had been holding in until I started talking. Everything came out at once. The comments, the lies, the way my mother was slowly turning the family against me. Megan stayed quiet the whole time. When I finished, there was a short pause. Then she said something that changed everything. "Okay," she said calmly. "Then we stopped playing defense." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she continued, "if your mom wants to control the story, we make sure she can't. We get ahead of it." That was the moment Operation Ivory Shield was born. First, it sounded almost silly, like something out of a movie. But the more we talked, the more it made sense. Because this wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about control. My mother had spent my entire life deciding how I was seen, how I was treated, and what role I played. And now she was trying to do the same thing on the biggest day of my life. But this time, I wasn't going to let her. Megan and I started planning carefully. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Strategically. First, we made a list of everything we knew about my mother's behavior. Her patterns. Her habits. The way she liked attention. The way she needed to be seen as the perfect mother. "She's going to do something at the wedding," Megan said. "Something big." I knew she was right. The signs were already there. My mom had stopped criticizing small things. Instead, she had become quiet. Too quiet. And that was worse. Because when my mother got quiet, it usually meant she was planning something. Then, about a week later, I started noticing something else. People were acting differently around me. Not everyone, but enough for me to feel it. Conversations would suddenly stop when I walked into a room. Some relatives became distant. Others gave me looks I didn't understand. It felt like I was missing something. Until one afternoon, my cousin finally told me the truth. She said you didn't want her at the wedding. I felt my chest tighten. "What?" I asked. "She told everyone you've been pushing her away," my cousin continued. "That you don't appreciate her, and that you're trying to keep her out of everything." I stood there in silence. Because it wasn't just a lie. It was the exact opposite of the truth. I had asked her to be part of everything. She just never showed up. But now, she was rewriting the story so perfectly that people were starting to believe it. That night, I called Megan again. "She's getting ahead of us," I said. "No," Megan replied calmly. "She thinks she is." There was a confidence in her voice that I didn't feel yet. But I trusted her. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We document everything," she said. And that's exactly what we did. Every message, every call, every moment where I had tried to include my mother. We kept records. Not because I wanted to expose her, but because I wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside of her version. At the same time, we started setting quiet boundaries. I stopped chasing her. I stopped asking for her approval. I stopped explaining myself. And for the first time, I felt something new. Peace. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Then 3 weeks before the wedding, everything changed. I was sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone when I saw it. A post. From my mother. First, it looked like any other post. Smiling faces. Bright lighting. A boutique in the background. But then I looked closer. My heart dropped. There was Paige. Standing in front of a mirror, wearing a full-length ivory gown. Not just any gown. A wedding gown. It had a long train. Soft lace details. The kind of dress that was meant to be the center of attention. My attention. On my wedding day. I stared at the screen trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe it was for something else. Maybe I was misunderstanding. But then I read the caption. "My beautiful girl is going to steal the show." I felt something break inside me, because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. My hands started shaking as I zoomed in on the photo. The dress wasn't just similar to a bridal gown. It was a bridal gown. And then it hit me. This was her plan. Not small. Not subtle. Big. Public. Impossible to ignore. She wasn't just trying to control the narrative anymore. She was trying to replace me. And my own wedding. I called Paige immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said casually, like nothing was wrong. "What is that dress?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "It's just a dress," she replied. "No," I said. "It's not just a dress. It's a wedding dress, Paige." Another pause. Then she sighed. "Mom picked it," she said. "Of course she did." "Are you planning to wear it to my wedding?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. And that silence told me everything. "Paige," I said softly, "please don't do this." For a moment, I thought maybe she would understand. Maybe she would choose me. But then she said something that hurt more than I expected. "You're overreacting, Wendy." Overreacting. I felt my chest tighten. "It's just a dress," she added. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. Wearing a wedding gown to someone else's wedding. To her own sister's wedding. And she didn't see anything wrong with it. Or maybe, she just didn't care. That call ended something between us. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But permanently. Because in that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. It wasn't just my mother. Paige had been choosing her side all along. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, staring at my phone. And then I did something I had never done before. I stopped hoping they would change. And I started planning for what I already knew. They wouldn't. That night I called Megan again. And this time I didn't sound unsure. "They're going to do it," I said. Megan didn't hesitate. "I know," she replied. "So what's the plan?" I asked. There was a short pause. Then she said, "Now we finish Operation Ivory Shield." And for the first time, I felt ready. After that phone call with Megan, everything became very clear. There was no more confusion, no more doubt, no more hoping that things would somehow fix themselves. My mother had made her move. Now it was my turn. Operation Ivory Shield was no longer just an idea. It became a real plan. A detailed, careful, and quiet plan. And the most important part? We were going to stay calm. Because my mother expected emotion. She expected me to react, to argue, to create a scene before the wedding even happened. But this time I wasn't going to give her that. I was going to be prepared. The next morning, Megan came over with coffee and a notebook. She sat across from me at the kitchen table like we were about to plan something serious, because we were. "Step 1, she said, opening the notebook. "Control the environment." I nodded, listening carefully. "She wants attention," Megan continued. "So we limit her ability to take it." That meant one thing. Structure. We started organizing the wedding timeline in a way that left no room for surprises. Every moment had a plan. Every entry point had someone responsible. Then came the most important decision. Security. First, I hesitated. Hiring security for a wedding felt extreme. It felt like admitting that something could go wrong. But then I remembered the dress, the post, the caption, and suddenly it didn't feel extreme anymore. It felt necessary. So we did it. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly. We hired 2 professional security guards and briefed them carefully. We didn't tell them everything, just what they needed to know. "There may be guests who don't follow the dress code," Megan explained to them. "You will stop them at the entrance." They nodded. Simple, clear, controlled. Then came the second part of the plan. The backup dress. If my mother showed up wearing white, we would give her a choice. Not a fight. A choice. We went out and picked a navy blue dress. Elegant, respectful, appropriate for a wedding guest. We kept it ready. Pressed. Waiting. "If she wants to stay, she changes," Megan said. "And if she doesn't?" I asked. "Then she leaves," Megan replied calmly. Sounded simple. But I knew it wouldn't feel simple in the moment. Because no matter what she had done, she was still my mother. The days leading up to the wedding felt strange. Too quiet. My mother didn't call. Didn't argue. Didn't complain. And that silence made everything feel heavier. It was like the calm before a storm. Paige didn't reach out either. No apology. No explanation. Just distance. And for the first time in my life, I didn't chase her. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to explain how I felt. Because I already knew. They had made their choice. Now I had to make mine. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous about getting married, but because I knew something was coming. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself in silence. For a moment, I saw the younger version of me. The girl who stayed quiet. The girl who tried to please everyone. The girl who always chose peace over herself. And then I looked closer. Because that girl wasn't there anymore. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who had finally learned that peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from boundaries. The morning of the wedding arrived faster than I expected. Everything moved quickly. Hair, makeup, voices, laughter, excitement. On the outside, it looked like a normal wedding day. But inside, I felt something deeper. Calm. Not nervous. Not scared. Just calm. Because I knew I was ready. Megan stayed close to me the entire time. She didn't say much, but her presence was enough. At one point, she looked at me and smiled. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I think so," I said. She squeezed my hand. You've got this." The ceremony was set at a beautiful vineyard. Open space, soft light, everything exactly how I had imagined. Guests started arriving early. Everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly. And then at exactly 3:47 p.m., Megan's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Then at me. "They're here," she said quietly. My heart skipped for a second. This was it. The moment everything had been leading to. I didn't move. I didn't panic. I just took a slow breath. "Okay," I said. Megan nodded and stepped away to coordinate with security. I stayed where I was. Still. Silent. Waiting. A few minutes later, one of the coordinators walked over to me. "They've been stopped at the entrance," she said gently. I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of fear, but out of release. Because everything we had planned was working. Outside, my mother had arrived exactly as expected. Silver Mercedes. Perfect timing. And of course, the dress. A full ivory gown. Long train. Bright. Impossible to ignore. She stepped out of the car expecting attention. Expecting people to turn and look. Expecting to take control of the moment. But instead, she was stopped. 2 security guards approached her before she could even reach the main path. Calm, professional, unmovable. They explained the situation clearly. "There is a strict dress code in effect," one of them said. At first, my mother didn't understand. Or maybe she pretended not to. "I'm the mother of the bride," she said, her voice full of confidence. "I understand," the guard replied calmly. "But the dress does not meet the requirements." There was a pause. Then came the moment. The choice. Megan stepped forward, holding the navy blue dress. "This is available for you," she said. "You're welcome to change and join the ceremony." Simple. Clear. Respectful. For a second, everything was quiet. And in that silence, there was a decision waiting to be made. Inside, I stood still, unaware of every word being said. But somehow I already knew. This wasn't just about a dress. This was about control. About pride. About everything my mother had always been. And in that moment, she had to choose. In that moment outside the venue, everything came down to one simple choice. Stay or leave. Change. Or hold on to pride. Later, I would hear every detail of what happened. Every word. Every reaction. But even before I heard it, I already knew how it would go. Because I knew my mother. She didn't like being told no. She didn't like losing control. And she definitely didn't like being corrected in public. When Megan held out the navy blue dress, calm and respectful, my mother didn't take it. Instead, she looked at it like it was an insult. "A backup dress?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "It's appropriate for the ceremony," Megan said gently. "You're welcome to change and come in." My mother's expression hardened. "I am not changing," she said. The security guards didn't react. They stayed calm, exactly as we had planned. "I understand," one of them said. "But in that case, you won't be able to enter." That was the moment everything shifted. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone didn't bend for her. Someone didn't argue. Someone didn't try to please her. They simply held the boundary. And she didn't know what to do with that. Paige stood next to her, still wearing the ivory gown. For a moment she looked unsure. Like she was waiting for direction. Waiting for my mother to decide what they would do next. That's how it had always been. My mother leads. Paige follows. But this time something was different. "Paige," Megan said softly, turning to her. "You can still come in. Just change into the dress." She held out another navy dress. For a second, everything was quiet again. Paige looked at the dress, then at my mother, then back at the entrance. You could almost see the conflict on her face. Because for the first time, she wasn't being told what to do. She had to choose. My mother crossed her arms. "We're leaving," she said firmly. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. And for most of our lives, that would have been enough. Paige would have nodded, followed her, and never looked back. But this time, she didn't move. Paige hesitated. My mother turned to her, surprised. "What are you doing?" she asked. Paige swallowed. I'm going to stay," she said quietly. There was a silence that felt heavier than anything else that day, because that had never happened before. Not once. In 33 years, Paige had never gone against her. Not openly. Not directly. My mother stared at her like she didn't recognize her. "You're choosing this over me?" she asked. Paige didn't answer right away. But she didn't move either. And that was the answer. Slowly, she reached out and took the navy dress from Megan's hands. "I'll change," she said. My mother's face changed in that moment. Not just anger. Something deeper. Shock. Because the control she had held for so long slipped. Just for a second. But enough to matter. "Fine," she said coldly. "Do whatever you want." And with that she turned around, walked back to her car, and sat inside. Alone. She didn't leave the parking lot. She stayed there. In the driver's seat. Watching. Waiting. But she never came inside. Back inside the venue, I was told everything was handled. No details. Just that it was taken care of. And that was enough for me. Because I didn't want to focus on the conflict anymore. I wanted to focus on the reason I was there. Luke. The music started softly in the background. Guests took their seats. The atmosphere shifted from tension to something peaceful. Real. And then it was time. I stood at the start of the aisle holding my bouquet, taking a deep breath. For a brief moment, my mind wandered. I thought about everything that had led to this point. All the years of feeling invisible. All the moments I stayed silent. All the times I chose peace over myself. And then I thought about what had just happened. The boundary. The choice. The strength it took to stand firm. And I realized something. I wasn't that same person anymore. I wasn't the girl standing in the background. I wasn't the one waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. And that changed everything. The music grew louder. And I started walking, step by step down the aisle. Alone. But not lonely. Because for the first time in my life, I felt complete. I saw Luke standing at the end waiting for me. His eyes softened the moment he saw me. And in that look there was no doubt. No hesitation. Just love. Pure and steady. When I reached him, he took my hands gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. And for the first time I believed it. The ceremony was simple. No drama. No interruptions. Just quiet, meaningful moments. The kind that stay with you forever. Somewhere outside, my mother sat in her car. Still in that $7,000 ivory gown. Still holding on to the attention she never got. But inside, life was moving forward. Without her control. Without her narrative. Without her shadow. Paige joined the ceremony a few minutes later, wearing the navy dress. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down quietly. And for once, she didn't try to take attention. She didn't try to stand out. She just existed. Like a normal guest. And maybe that was the beginning of something new. Or maybe it was just a moment. I didn't know yet. But I didn't need to. Because that day wasn't about fixing everything. It was about starting something different. Something healthier. Something real. As I stood there saying my vows, I felt something I had never truly felt before. Freedom. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just steady. Like a weight I didn't know I was carrying had finally been lifted. Because for the first time, I didn't let my past control my present. And that made all the difference. The ceremony ended with applause, soft music, and a feeling I still struggle to describe. It wasn't just happiness. It was something deeper. Relief. Like I had been holding my breath for years, and finally let it go. As Luke and I walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, I noticed something I hadn't expected. People were looking at me differently. Not with pity. Not with confusion. But with understanding. Because they had seen everything. Not the full story from the past, but enough of the truth from that day. The whispers my mother had spread. They didn't match what people had just witnessed. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. The truth had spoken on its own. The reception was warm and peaceful. Laughter filled the air, glasses clinked, and conversations flowed naturally. It felt real. It felt like something that belonged to me, not something controlled, not something forced, just mine. At one point, my aunt came up to me, the same aunt who had once asked why I was being so hard on my mother. She looked at me for a moment before speaking. "I didn't know," she said quietly. I nodded. "It's okay," I replied. And for the first time I meant it. Because I understood something now. People only knew the version of the story they were told. And for years my mother had been telling it. But not anymore. Later, my grandmother slowly walked over to me, holding my hand gently. She was 82, but her eyes were still sharp. "I saw everything," she said. I smiled softly. She squeezed my hand and added, "You did the right thing." Those words stayed with me, because they weren't loud or dramatic, but they were honest. And that's all I needed. Paige approached me much later. She looked different. Not physically, but in the way she carried herself. Quieter. More careful. "I'm sorry," she said. Just 2 words. Simple. But heavy. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see my competition. I saw someone who had been living under the same control, just in a different way. "You stayed," I said. She nodded. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But I don't want to keep doing this." I understood what she meant. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. "We'll figure it out," I said. And that was all we needed to say. Not a perfect ending. Not a full repair. Just a start. The rest of the night passed peacefully. No drama. No tension. Just moments that felt real and meaningful. And somewhere outside, in the parking lot, my mother stayed in her car. She didn't come in. She didn't call. She didn't try to fix anything. She just sat there. Alone. Holding on to the one thing she refused to let go of. Control. But this time, it didn't work. Because for the first time, I didn't give it to her. The next few weeks were quiet. There were messages. Some from family members asking questions. Some apologizing. Some just checking in. And slowly the truth spread. Not because I forced it, but because people had seen enough to start asking their own questions. My mother, of course, had her version. She told people I had embarrassed her. That I had thrown her out. That I had chosen strangers over family. But this time, there were witnesses. People who had seen her arrive. Seen the dress. Seen the choice she was given. And seen the choice she made. And that changed everything. Because the story didn't belong to her anymore. 7 months later, things look very different. Not perfect, but real. My relationship with my mother is honest now. Not close. Not warm. But clear. There are boundaries. Strong ones. The kind that don't bend under pressure. We don't pretend anymore. We don't force conversations. We don't play roles. And strangely, that has brought more peace than anything else ever did. Because for the first time, I'm not trying to earn something that was never freely given. I've accepted what is. And I've built something better around it. Luke and I are happy. Not in a perfect storybook way, but in a real steady way. The kind that grows stronger over time. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. And Paige, she's different now. Still figuring things out. Still learning. But trying. And sometimes that's enough. As for my mother, that ivory gown is still hanging in her closet. Untouched. Unworn again. A $7,000 reminder of a moment where control didn't win. A moment where I chose myself. And that matters more than anything. Because for most of my life, I believed keeping the peace meant staying silent. Accepting less. Being smaller. But now I know the truth. Peace isn't something you keep by losing yourself. It's something you create by standing your ground. By choosing your dignity. By knowing your worth even when others refuse to see it. And if you've ever been in that place, where staying quiet feels easier than speaking up, where keeping the peace feels safer than being honest, just know this. You are allowed to choose yourself. Even if it's hard. Even if it changes everything. Because sometimes, That's exactly what needs to happen. And if this story felt close to your heart, if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would, just remember, you're not alone, and your voice matters.